There are countless nightmarish creatures that inhabit the galaxy who amount to little more than savage animals or aggressive carnivorous flora. One of those that has been talked about a lot more recently and that we'll look at today is the Ambull. During the early explorations of the galaxy, mankind would quickly discover that it was not alone in the universe, and that not all of those who had built their own civilizations were peaceful and welcoming. Fast forward a few millennia, and since the inception of the Emperor's Great Crusade, it has become one of the goals of mankind to extinguish any and all alien life that poses a threat to humanity. This is in part because most creatures encountered by the forces of man generally wanted to in some way devour them, or were otherwise so aggressive that discussion or negotiation was just a non-starter. Rare exceptions such as the Eldar were generally just avoided or kept at a distance on a fairly mutual basis of non-interaction in the early stages of mankind's explorations. Later on, while the general impact of this will lead to mankind becoming a society that is unquestionably xenophobic in the extreme, where Xenos civilizations could be discovered and then exterminated regardless of threat, culture, or the general disposition of the race. Due to millennia of religious indoctrination, most humans among the masses demand this kind of total eradication over any kind of ongoing relationship building. This ignorant sledgehammer approach is not a chance thing. Many human worlds have seen and experienced what the galaxy has to offer, and few will shed a tear for those incinerated far from home if it means they don't have to suffer the old fork in the eye later down the road. The horrors of the galaxy have forced mankind to double down on its fairly long-standing racist xenophobic tendencies. Horrors such as the Ambull, a beast so powerful it could easily bisect a space marine, armour and all, with a single swipe of its hardened claws. Ambulls are believed to have originated from a death world known as Luther McIntyre 9 in the Segmentum Solar. Now, death worlds are generally speaking planets which are too hazardous for settlement. They could be barren wastelands with burning temperatures that are lashed by ion storms, or planets where the entire surface is a dense jungle, where each plant and creature alive is in a continual war with everything else around it. While these locations are officially designated as unfit for human settlement, sometimes present resources or strategic location requires them to have some form of human outpost or even a significant settlement. With the technology of the Imperium, it would be easy to defend and secure such an outpost, but often the reason for the human presence on said planet is what gives rise to the reduced life expectancy of those living on such worlds, not to mention the physical and emotional trauma endured by those stationed on a death world. Traumas like an Ambull attack. Luther McIntyre 9 was one such Imperial death world, designated as necessary for mining operations as it contained rare gems and metals buried deep below its surface. But the network of tunnels that were discovered there later would be attributed to the Ambulls, allowed easy access for miners to collect the materials, and initially it appeared as if Ambulls could be a useful natural tool for humanity's mining operations. Ambulls generally live underground due to the intense heat and solar radiation on the surface above, but because of this, so do all the other creatures, creating an underground, quite combative ecosystem. Consequently, Ambulls are heavily armoured and have sharpened claws for digging their subterranean tunnel networks, as well as to enable them to quickly impale, eviscerate any prey that they track and come across. Indeed, Goliath rock grinders have mistakenly drilled through into Ambull nests on planets where they've established themselves, only to be found later ripped to shreds with little remaining of the quarrying crew. And Ambull's physical appearance is one of being vaguely humanoid but with significant insect-like features, hunched forward where their arms nearly reach the ground in a stance similar to that of some primates, but despite this their height can still be anything like 4 meters. They're covered in hardened carapace armor, and some could be forgiven for mistaking them for a form of tyrannid. Unlike the Tyranids though, Ambulls studied by Imperial Magos have shown to be actually extremely genetically stable. They seem to have evolved to a point where their DNA seems satisfied that they are a powerful enough apex life form to withstand much of what can be thrown at them, and consequently have minimal genetic changes, other than maybe their physical colouring altering perhaps for better camouflage on whatever world they end up on, but even studies of this have proved inconclusive. Ambulls are believed to be able to tunnel at considerable speed as well through soft and bedrock, as they often burst out upon their prey with little warning, allowing them to spring a shock attack that is as violent as it is unexpected, coming crashing through a rock wall, smashing their prey to pieces with heavily armoured barbed arms, or alternatively cleaving them in two, or maybe decapitating them with massive powerful mandibles, then dragging what's left down below ground to be fed upon. Although despite their carnivorous tendencies, there are accounts of Ambulls being able to use other sources such as radioactive and even thermal energy to stay functional. They could bore into a planet's crust to search for powerful heat sources, for example. And for any humans witnessing these shock attacks on friends or loved ones, it would certainly be a harrowing experience, but then so are most things in the dark civilization of man in the far future. Perhaps most concerning is that Ambull's eyes see in infrared, allowing them to see the heat signatures of their prey, but their vision seems to also lend itself to their previously mentioned ability to be able to be fueled by non-organic means, and so this makes it easier for them to locate other sources of power, and this suggests as to why they're able to partially see in infrared. Often, unfortunately for Imperial citizens, this may mean artificial power sources like a plasma generator, where an Ambull could potentially burrow into in search of energy and subsequently cause a disastrous meltdown at an Imperial facility. Despite their brutal level of violence displayed when launching themselves upon prey, Ambulls are actually quite social and family-orientated creatures. They tunnel for kilometers underground, forming vast networks of interconnecting tunnels, allowing them to hunt and travel around their territory, looking and sensing for prey. Several adults will tend to their broods of boar worms, which are unfortunately as dangerous to many other life forms, including humans, as their fully grown family. The bullworms are hatched from nest sacs with an egg-like appearance, will either be tended to by adult Ambulls or seek out radioactive minerals, artificial power cells, or other energy sources to fuel their growth. A single bullworm will still be about as big as an average human, and with serrated mouthparts and gripping pincers that could easily tear through your average guardsman with unpleasant efficiency. While there exists a total ban on trading and exporting Ambulls and bullworms within the Imperium of Man, they have, of course, managed to be transported from their native world to many other locations. Because of the apparent ease with which Ambulls had managed to mine through the bedrock of Luther McIntyre 9 and enabled access to the minerals, it was considered that they could be useful for the Imperium on other worlds. This, though, was quite the miscalculation. Ambulls introduced onto other worlds would, instead of digging constructively to allow easier access to resources, would annoyingly burrow their way into atmosphere processors and plasma generators. This created crippling infrastructure issues and destabilized planetary environments, as well as obviously a loss of human life, but that's nothing that we need to be worried about. Other reasons for the transportation of Ambulls are easily speculated. Strange cults, rich collectors of Xenos flora and fauna, nobles wanting some kind of gruesome pit fighters entertainment, the list goes on. Ambull meat apparently has a delicious flavour for one, but Ambull's steak proved prohibitively costly for obvious reasons, as in order to successfully farm them, a roster of willing farmers to replace those who had been shredded by captive Ambulls was often needed. Some have been rumoured to have been ordered for attempted domestication for pets or as guard creatures, except that again, even when captured, Ambulls have the annoying habit of ripping their way out of their containment areas, often then leaving them loose to rip their way through the ship that they were on, mauling any crew that they would come across, and likely either ripping out into space, exposing the ship to a vacuum, or worse, destabilizing the Geller field while in the warp, almost ensuring that the ship would then be obliterated. While Ambull's native environmental conditions are sandy and rocky with extreme surface temperatures, they have proved to be perhaps surprisingly adaptable to other conditions and environments. They've even been known to exist within blackstone fortresses. This is mainly due to the fact that unless they find themselves deposited on another death world, all other planetary conditions are usually more or less tolerable for the Ambull, and sources of food usually more plentiful and less difficult to acquire. They also are able, thanks to creatures with a maggot-like appearance that seem to hold a symbiotic relationship with the Ambull, will appear from its chitinous armoured plates, ingesting the damaged flesh on an Ambull, and through their stimulating secretions enable the Ambull to re-knit its damaged tissue in moments. This makes Ambulls incredibly tough and difficult to take down, even when they take a sustained beating from projectile firepower. And when it comes to their breeding, presumably because, again, on their native world with its extreme conditions, the mortality rates have the potential to be high, Ambulls on more standardized worlds are seen to breed very quickly, increasing the threat they pose to local populations, lower hive city levels such as an underhive, and with their tunneling habits potentially causing massive damage to any Imperial infrastructures and buildings. Now, natural environmental conditions aside, they are able to easily survive in heavily irradiated or chemically polluted environments with seemingly little to no effect on their health. Their curious survival ability in such a range of conditions does make sense when we consider they have that ability to gain energy from a variety of quite hazardous energy sources. This makes them suited for extreme natural and industrial environments alike, much to the dismay of many an Imperial industrial worker or Hive City underhive gang members for that matter. Once an Ambull infestation has taken hold, it's going to be an unpleasant and costly task to remove them, both in the damage they'll do to the infrastructure in the meantime and any cleanup crews tasked to deal with the situation alike. While often the deeds and battles between the races of the galaxy in the dark future become a regular core focus, who is fighting against who on what world, what's at stake, these engagements and indeed the scale of the galaxy with its world-ending battles can often take attention away from the creatures, characters and worlds who are interesting enough and just as worthy of their own attention. There are hundreds of thousands of worlds out there, many that are waiting to be further documented by xenologists, rogue traders and the like. Ambulls are a powerful monstrosity who have reached the peak of evolution through survival in the harshest of environments. If anything, they are an excellent representation for what it takes to survive in the 41st millennium. To survive in the crucible of galactic war, you must be the apex predator, because nothing else will suffice.